Welcome. I'm Arleigh with Bike Shop Girl, and today I have the good fortune of bringing on Andrew Ford, who has become my go-to resource for all things bike GPS tracking. Andrew, thank you for joining us as he's slamming the coffee down. We've talked back and forth on Twitter. He owns a Turn GSD, is I think how I first got wind of your YouTube channel. But Andrew's been researching and testing a lot of different GPS trackers with the goal of tracking his bike and scooters. So today I just wanted to kind of bring Andrew on, talk about what he's learned, and then point people to his various videos that he's done. You actually set up a bait bike. So let's talk. Andrew,
yeah,
welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I kind of got started on this just because I was very tentative about buying the GSD because it's a super expensive bike. Like, you can get an old Honda Civic or you can get a Turn GSD. So as soon as I bought it, people were like, enjoy that bike while it lasts because it's going to get stolen. And I think I slightly felt that too. So I just wanted some way to secure it better. I bought really nice U-locks, but there's a million videos of people cutting through the thickest U-lock possible in just a couple minutes with like $100 angle grinder. So I think for me, the reason I kind of started to dive into this was both to protect my own bike, but also because I think e-bikes have gotten very good, or at least good enough. They can be a car replacement if you've got the right bags and panniers. But the only difference is that if you buy an old car that's the same price, the chance of it getting stolen is low, whereas the chance of your bike getting stolen, that's a juicy piece of hardware to just leave outside of a grocery store. So yeah, I just kind of felt like this was the most underlooked part of e-bikes, which is that there wasn't much theft prevention research being done for it. Nice locks, but outside of that, not very many companies are doing anything about it.
Yeah, and I think it was also the time that more trackers were hitting the market. I've used the Tile tracker forever because we lose our keys and Apple remote within the house. But that's really why I used it, was just for my own finding, I left a wallet in the car or something like that. But I didn't really rely on the network because it requires people to have the app installed and running for it to ping your Tile. So you started a year or more ago talking about Tile and then Samsung. So take us on your GPS tracking journey.
So I think the first thing I started with was a Tile, because I think we all heard it got really good battery life compared to a dedicated GPS. It's also, I don't know if I have it here, but it's tiny, so you could hide it on a bike. So I first started using that and I just put it on my keys. And then eventually I did lose my keys, and trying to recover them was hard. Eventually I did find them, but I was out with my phone. There wasn't the nice Apple ping, that's where it's at. It was just kind of it's somewhere in this, perimeter. So I eventually did find my keys, but I was that's not good enough to secure a bike, especially if it's inside a building. So then the next step with that was I looked into dedicated GPS trackers, and the first one I got was Samsung makes it was probably the first wave of this newest round of GPS trackers that uses a lower energy cell phone network, so that ideally you can get better battery life. So yeah, that was the first one I tried, and I was hoping to get I think they advertise 5 to 7 days worth of battery life. And I thought okay, that would be a hassle, but it would be doable. But in practice, it was only a couple days. And then also I just found that the software and hardware was extremely buggy. So it would just randomly die after 6 hours. And if you're trying to recover your bike, especially if you're trying to get police involved or even yourself in a scary area, you need the hardware to work. So that's something that I realized, especially with a lot of these smaller GPS players, is that you want the software and hardware to be rock solid. And I think most of them are not that way. So I kind of re-researched, re-looked for them. and then eventually found the Invoxia tracker, which is a little bit bigger than you'd like it to be. Yep, right there. So on a normal bike, like it's tough to hide, but if you've got a cargo bike or a box bike, something like that, like there's going to be some places you can hide it. So I kind of did like an in-depth review of that, testing it out, and then I was like, okay, this is pretty good. So then my next question was just like, why aren't bike companies? Yeah, it's small enough. You can hide that on a GSD.
It's like, I'm not a smoker, but it's the size of a cigarette lighter, but taller, like 1.5 cigarette lighters stacked.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that seems about right.
It can fit in my palm. I wouldn't want it on my keys. I'll definitely link in the show notes to it because I think it is the market leader right now that I've seen and tested. And Andrew, before we talk too far into like pros and cons of each version, it feels like the two things we're all after are battery life and then how often it pings and why it pings. So when we talk about pinging, right, like how often does it update its location? And the downfall of that is it kills your battery if it's pinging too often. But you need it to be pinging often to know that it's been stolen. You know, where, you know, could movement activate it? You know, some sort of like accelerometer or bump test or something like that, versus it always just doing it on a time schedule.
Yeah, completely. So I think one of the nice things about Invoxia is I think they did try that out. And what they included is that if your bike isn't moving, it'll reduce, you know, whatever you pick that ping speed to be every 5 minutes or 10 minutes or half hour. So long as your bike isn't moving, it'll only do that check every 24 hours, which is that's what makes it have such good battery life, I think, compared to the Samsung. Like they might be running the same chips, same hardware, same battery size, but they've just made it so that as long as the bike isn't moving, they don't keep doing that check.
What is your current setup? Because I know you have multiple bikes, scooters, and such, and you just posted a really great YouTube video which prompted this interview, where you had an AirTag and you set up a bait bike.
Yeah.
And so I'll link to that in the show notes. I won't give it away just so people click through to your channel. But what is your current setup right now and why?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's important to start with the why, because then it might sound like my setup is overdone. But you know, any decent e-bike is gonna cost more than $1,000. And if you want like a nice mid-drive, like it's gonna be $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 if you get the top of the line GSD. So I feel like the cost for any of these GPS trackers is just free compared to getting your bike stolen and not getting it back. So my current setup is I have one GPS tracker, which I have set to get about like a month of battery life. Cool. I've got that. There may be better ones now, but like when I was doing all my research, like it's good. It's good enough to work. So I've got one GPS tracker and then I have 2 Apple AirTags.
So is that like $300 worth of?
No, it's only $129 plus 50. Yeah. $190.
Okay.
$180. Yeah.
And this is something I've learned. You don't want to use one AirTag.
Yeah.
Because people are now searching for them.
Yep. Yeah. I think, the thing is that, you know, Apple, I think they don't really want to be in the theft business. They want to be in the find your keys in the house business.
So they're really taking on Tile versus like true tracking of people and devices.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are. I mean, they're doing a much better job, and they're also like much more privacy centric than Tile is. And I think you can use it as a pretty good tracker, but I think just like publicly, like Apple is like a very like clean cut company, like recovering stolen goods, like people that are stealing stuff, you know, they're in bad times. They don't have a better job. Like it's messy. So I think just Apple doesn't quite want to be associated with that too much. So they've built in, well, I think they don't advertise it for that. But then also, maybe this is a semicolon here. A separate part of it is that Apple has all these built-in like anti-stalking features, because people have been using them both for stalking and for like stealing stuff, because you can just hide that tiny little tag anywhere. So they just haven't made it as full featured as a GPS, because they've done these anti-stalking things that make it so that basically if you put a single AirTag on your bike and the thief has an iPhone, it will notify him that there's an AirTag on the bike, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I use my AirTags. I was talking before we hit record. I use them when we travel to make sure like the bag made it onto the plane, because it requires an Apple device to ping it to know where it is. And then I use it if I'm out and about, like I have it on random things, but it's more, for the price of them, I prefer the Tile for sure, but not enough people, just for my own like personal use. Like I attach it to the Apple remote, and it just needs to like notify me where the Apple remote is. It doesn't need to like ping every Apple device around it. It just needs to work.
Yeah.
Versus the AirTags, like I have them in every bag and checked luggage and anything like that, so that when I'm flying or traveling, I know where all my stuff is, or if it gets moved, I know, especially when we're at trade shows, like I want to know where my bags are and that no one's messing with them. So it's an interesting, I think there's definitely a huge need for them, but I'm really interested in more of like the true GPS using 4G or 5G, for fleet tracking or theft.
Yeah.
So it's super intriguing to me to hear like you and your bait bike and like how it actually worked and how often things were pinging and why that mattered. Are you happy? Let's say that. Are you happy with your current setup? Are you going to like continue to research and become the GPS bike tracker dude?
Ideally, I would, in this year or next year, I would get a new bike and it would be totally integrated and I wouldn't have to deal with it at all. Like the only reason that I'm doing just GPS videos and not just doing e-bike reviews is that I think like this is like the biggest glaring emission in e-bikes. Emission, not emission, but emission.
It could be an emission. It is a battery. Yeah. I think theft and infrastructure are the two things that are keeping our country. And, in Europe, if anybody follows like electric bikes or cargo bikes in Europe, theft is insane there. You have to have certain levels of locks for your insurance, and everybody has their bikes covered. And that whole idea of tracking is something we're really focused on at Turn, but just for me to grow that cargo bike movement, it needs to be as safe and reliable as a car, and that includes security.
Yeah, I think ideally it's integrated as part of. In Europe, they have POW Unity. Is that the like tracker that goes inside the motor and it like runs off the electronics? You don't have to charge it. Like I think that's the dream. They don't do that in the US, but it seems like people are really happy with that. And that is kind of like the dealer installs it and then it's done. Like ideally the factory installs it and then it's done. But I think having the dealer is like the next best thing.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's going to be the next phase. Like right now we're in the early adoption. And so I think you and I we maybe find it interesting to like figure out GPS and tracking and things. But most people, they just want this recommendation, or they want it to already come on a bike that cost $4,000+. And until it does, maybe they're not going to venture out as far, or maybe they just don't buy the bike.
Yeah, I think it's both of them. I mean, the thing that I really worry about is somebody buys the really nice bike and then it gets stolen and then they don't replace it. And then also when their friends ask, hey, what happened to your bike? It got stolen, and then they give up on it. So I think we want like to grow the market a huge amount, but we also need to like keep everybody in the tent that's in the tent. And if their bike gets stolen, I'd be curious to know how many people buy an expensive bike and then replace it with another expensive bike.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. Let us know in the comments. Yeah, I think infrastructure and bike theft, if we can figure those out here, so many more people are going to be willing to take those car trips and reduce them or replace them.
Obviously like bike lanes matter, but then also these bike lockers I think are awesome, but it's just always harder to build out infrastructure than it is to build. Yeah, I'd love to see Mayor Pete, give us all some bucks to put some bike lockers everywhere. I just find that infrastructure changes very slowly. So, until that happens, in the meantime, we can sort of do a little bit of protection on our own.
I'm going to link to all of your videos in the show notes.
Okay.
But how would people find you on YouTube or Twitter?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm maybe Andrew Ford. And then on YouTube, they'll give me like the URL, but not a good one. So if you just search Andrew Ford YouTube, I think I'll pop up. If not, Andrew Ford e-bike, I bet then I'll be number one.
I love it. And I'll put links in the show notes, and we'll continue. My guess is to have these conversations. Hopefully new things come out and things get updated. And here's to like having it like a car where you just walk away and it locks itself and you don't have any problems anymore.